Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and I want to talk about how we as dungeon masters choose to present depression, how we choose to depict depression in non-player characters. I think there's a lot to talk about here. So first of all, I want to point you to a video by Anya Turnbull. And this video discusses depression, discusses narcissism, and discusses David Foster Wallace. All right, so let's define our terms here. So first of all, narcissism is love of self. Okay, and basically it's from Narcissus, who's this literary character who came across himself and saw his own reflection in a pool of water and was just lost in the beauty of himself. So narcissism is self-love. It's just complete self-obsession, right? And now let's talk about David Foster Wallace. So David Foster Wallace is incredibly important. He is an incredibly important American writer. His work, he was well on the way to creating a very powerful, distinct, a very powerful and distinct body of literature, and basically he had a bad ending, a very bad ending, and his body of work was interrupted, right? But he had a lot to say about depression, right? And Anya Turnbull has looked at his work very, very carefully and has a new view of depression. And I think every dungeon master who is an adult, there are dungeon masters between 12 and 18. If you are a dungeon master between 12 and 18, please stop by. I think you should stop watching this video. And actually, all my stuff is marked as not for kids, so that's good. But I think if you're a dungeon master, I'm really glad that we have dungeon masters in the community between 12 and 18. But if you're a dungeon master in the community between 12 and 18, I would ask you to come back and enjoy this video when you're 18. All right, there you go. All right, so basically, she goes into this discussion of depression, and I think it's a unique understanding of depression. It's a new understanding of depression. In my humble opinion, it's correct. All right. However, depression is a deep subject, and I absolutely invite each and every one of you to get in the comments and let me know what you know about depression. If anything I say here you think is wrong. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. So let's go forward. Right. So first of all, and so David Foster Wallace, he also wrote Infinite Jest. Infinite Jest is one of 3 books that have defeated me in my life. I've read over 600 books in my life, and that is very much thanks to Dungeons & Dragons. It is my humble opinion. I tell you every day that Gary Gygax built Dungeons & Dragons as a human flourishment tool, in my humble opinion. I literally have 3 different libraries, right? And one of the reasons why is Gary Gygax said to me when I was 12 years old and I opened up the red box, it was a transformative moment in my life. When I opened up the red box, I was like, wait, I get to build the entire world. I determine what the weather is. I determine who the deities are on this planet. I determine the economy, the politics, everything. And I inhabit every single entity that is in this game that is not a player character. Like, what? Right? But wouldn't I have to understand literally everything about life to be a dungeon master? And and Gary was alive then, right? And his art shouted in my face and said, yes, you're not excused from anything. You have to understand every aspect of humanity. Get to work, right? And I heeded the demand of his art, and I do it today, and it's why I've read 600 books in my lifetime, right? Like, it has utterly transformed my life. And when I tell you Dungeons & Dragons is a human flourishment tool, I don't say that from some precious concept. It has literally transformed my life, and I own 3 libraries to this day because the demands Gary Gygax set with his art in 1982. When I opened the red box, I was changed forever. Right? Gary Gygax made a 1986, a 1983 to 1986 cartoon that showed Dungeons & Dragons characters, showed human children, like 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, being trapped in Dungeons & Dragons forever. I have been trapped in Dungeons & Dragons forever. When I opened that red box, I had no hope of ever escaping. But what I found was the only thing that was there was human improvement, right? The only thing that was there was a better understanding of language, a higher vocabulary, and an unceasing, like fervor to understand every single aspect of humanity. That's Dungeons & Dragons, right? And that's why you and me need to look at depression again, because you and I are going to depict depressed non-player characters in Dungeons & Dragons. You're like, Scott, when would I do that? Did you just read Dragonlance, Shadow of the Dragon Queen? There's a period where Lord Bakaris thinks that the Bakaris the Younger is dead, and that he led him to his death with his attack at Spring Hill Cliff, right? At Steel Hill Spring, right? So Lord Bakaris is a depressed character at one very distinct point in Dragonlance, Shadow of the Dragon Queen. So even if you're just running bog standard, right, like D&D canon hardbacks, you're gonna have to depict depression, right? And if you're building your own world, you are absolutely gonna have to depict non-player characters, entities within Dungeons & Dragons. I'm starting to refer to player characters as characters, non-player characters as entities. I think it's better language. And also, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but NPC has become kind of a loaded term and was like banned on quite a few social media for things that had nothing to do with Dungeons & Dragons. So I like that term entity a little better. So you're going to have to depict entities in Dungeons & Dragons that are depressed, right? So how do you do that, right? So one, you can go with the bog standard, in my humble opinion, completely useless definition of it through that is put forward by psychology today, or you can keep thinking and you can embrace new understandings of depression. And I think Anya Turnbull has an excellent new understanding of depression that we should definitely consider using to depict depression in Dungeons & Dragons when we depict depression through an entity as a dungeon master within Dungeons & Dragons. So let's talk about Anya Turnbull's new understanding of depression, which I think is a much better model than you will find through psychology. And let's look at what she has to say and then see how we would apply this in Dungeons & Dragons. All right, here we go. Okay. She says depression, right? Not for everybody who's depressed, but maybe at the macro level, and certainly for a distinct number of depressed people, is not actually a sadness. It is a very calculated program of attention getting, right? And here's how we get there. So she's saying, having read Foster Wallace's works, which are highly focused on depression, what she now understands depression as, and this is my read, if you think I got any of this wrong after you watch her video, let me know, right? So here's what she says. Here's what she's saying. She's saying, okay, it manifests as depression, and the person's like, I'm sad. But often what they're doing is they are they're making insults about themselves to friends, which immediately prompts their friends to defend them and actually compliment them, right? And depression is often, I'm sad, right? Not a sadness for a very, very, this is very true. Depression rarely comes from, I'm sad because this thing happened to someone else. It's, I'm sad because of the impact this is having on me, right? Which is self-obsession. So Anya Turnbull is saying that you can understand, in my humble opinion, Anya Turnbull is saying that you can understand depression as self-obsession, right? And here we get there, and she's saying narcissism. Narcissism classically is defined as self-love. But what if you realize that self-hate is simply a different way to think constantly about yourself and be self-obsessed, right? So Anya Turnbull is saying, really, depression is self-obsession, and it is narcissism. And it is a calculated long-term plan to constantly take from friends and family and put their attention on you. I think that's actually pretty freaking brilliant. I think that's incredibly brilliant, right? And the moment we see that depression is, and if we listen to Anya Turnbull, understand her better model of understanding depression, in my humble opinion, then we can think about our own depression and we're like, well, I could be sad, or I could stop being a sad sack, self-obsessed nub and move on. That's pretty helpful, right? And I think, understanding Anya Turnbull's new understanding, new model of depression, and new explanation of depression is freeing for us personally, but far more important, it gives us a very unique way to depict depression in entities within Dungeons & Dragons, and allowing player characters to actually come to a new understanding of depression. Anya Turnbull's understanding of depression as really self-obsession and really narcissism, right? Through Dungeons & Dragons, right? And again, here we arrive there. When you're dealing with Dungeons & Dragons, it is an abstraction IRL engine, in my humble opinion, and we can communicate truths about life, especially new ones that are better than the old models that we've been told, which really aren't truth, but in my humble opinion are simply excuses, right? So I think Anya Turnbull is 100% correct. I think understanding depression as self-obsession and narcissism and a prolonged plan to get attention for ourselves is a better understanding of depression. I think it's simply a better understanding. I'm not asking you to sign on to this new understanding of, in my humble opinion, of depression. What I'm saying is, as a dungeon master, you have a choice, right? You can simply make your entities in Dungeons & Dragons boring and sad, right? Using the old psychology depiction of depression. Or you can be an engaged tier 1 superior dungeon master and present new models of depression through depiction within your entities within Dungeons & Dragons, right? This is how I intend to depict depression going forward within my Dungeons & Dragons game, right? You have a choice on how you're going to do it with yours. Embrace the old, don't embrace anything new, right? Or accept the new model, accept the new depiction, right? Accept the new understanding, and then spread it, share it through narrative with your players. Every single word of that is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion. When you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.